Chapter 9 of Spinning Wheel Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Candace Stellick, Dallas, Texas. Spinning Wheel Stories by Louisa May Alcott. Chapter 9. Daisy's Jewel Box and How She Filled It. Plenty of time for another. Let the little folks go to bed. Now they've had their story, and please go on, Auntie, cried Min, when all had listened with more interest than they would confess to the children's tale. So the small people trotted off, much against their will, and this most obliging of aunts drew forth another manuscript, saying, as she glanced at several of her elder nieces, brave in the new trinket Santa Claus had sent them, "This is a story with a moral to it, which the girls will understand. The boys can take naps while I read, for it won't interest them. If it shows up the girls, we shall like it," answered Jeff, and composed himself to hear and enjoy. Daisy's Jewel Box and How She Filled It. It would be perfectly splendid, and just what I long for, but I don't see how I can go with nothing fit to wear, said Daisy, looking up from the letter in her hand with a face full of girlish eagerness and anxiety. Mrs. Field set every fear at rest with a reassuring smile, as she quietly made one of the sacrifices mothers think so small when made for the dear creatures for whom they live. "You shall go, dear. I have a little sum put by for an emergency. $25 will do a good deal, when tastes are simple and we do our own dressmaking." "But, Mother, that was for your cloak. You need it so much I can't bear to have you give it up," said sober little Jane, the home girl, who never cared for visiting like her gay elder sister. "Hush, dear. I can do very well with a shawl over my old sack. Don't say a word to spoil Daisy's pleasure. She needs a change after this dull autumn, and must be neat and nice." Janey said no more, and fell to thinking what she had to offer Daisy, for both took great pride in the pretty girl, who was the queen among her young friends. Daisy heard, but was so busy rereading the letter that she took no notice then. Then she recalled the words later. "Come and pass the holidays with us. We all want to see you, and Laura begs you will not disappoint her." This was the invitation that came from Laura's mother, for the two girls had struck up a great friendship during the summer the city family passed in the little country town where Daisy lived. She had ardently hoped that Laura would not forget the charming plan, and now the cordial message came, just when the season would be gayest in town. "I suppose I must have the everlasting white muslin for a party dress, as that is the cheapest thing a girl can wear. A nun's veiling is what I long for, but I'm afraid we can't afford it," she said with a sigh, coming back from visions of city delights to the all-important question of dress. "Yes, you can, and new ribbons, gloves, and slippers as well. You are so small it doesn't take much, and we can make it right up ourselves. So run and collect all your little finery while I go and do the shopping at once. You dearest of mothers! How you always manage to give me what I want, and smooth all my worries away. I'll be as good as gold, and bring you the best present I can find." Daisy's grateful kiss warmed the dear woman's heart, and made her forget how shabby the old sack was, as she trudged away to spend the money carefully hoarded for the much-needed cloak. Needles and fingers flew, and 2 days before Christmas Daisy set out for the enchanted city, feeling very rich, with the pretty new dress in her trunk, and $5 for pocket money. It seemed a large sum to the country girl, as she planned to spend it all in gifts for Mother and Janey, whose tired faces rather haunted her after she had caught the last glimpse of them. Her reception was a warm one, for all the Vaughns were interested in the blooming little creature they had found among the hills, and did their best to make her visit a pleasant one. The first day she was in a delightful sort of maze. Things were so splendid, gay, and new. The second she felt awkward and countrified, and wished she had not come. A letter from her mother on Christmas morning did her good, and gave her courage to bear the little trials that afflicted her. My clothes do look dowdy besides Laura's elegant costumes, though they did seem very nice at home. But my hair isn't red, and that's a comfort," she said to herself as she dressed for the party that evening. She could not help smiling at the bonny figure she saw in the long mirror, and wishing Mother and Janey could see the work of their hands in all its glory, for the simple white dress was most becoming, and her kind host had supplied her with lovely flowers for bosom and bouquet. But the smile died as she took up her one ornament, an antique necklace given her by an old aunt. At home it was considered a very rare and beautiful thing, and Daisy had been rather proud of her rococo chain till she saw Laura's collection of trinkets, the variety and brilliancy of which dazzled her eyes, and woke a burning desire to possess treasures of the same sort. It was some consolation to find that the most striking were not very expensive, and after poring over them with deep interest, Daisy privately resolved to buy as many as her $5 would compass. These new ornaments could be worn during her visit, and serve as gifts when she went home, so the extravagance would not be so great as it seemed. This purpose comforted her, as she put on the old necklace, which looked very dingy beside the rhinestones that flashed, the silver bangles that clashed, and the gilded butterflies, spiders, arrows, flowers, and daggers that shone on the young girls whom she met that evening. Their fine dresses she could not hope to imitate, but a pin and a pair of bracelets were possible, and she resolved to have them, if she had to borrow money to get home with. Her head was quite turned by this desire for the cheap trinkets which attract all feminine eyes nowadays, and when, among the pretty things that came to her from the Christmas tree that night, she received a blue plush jewel box, she felt that it was almost a duty to fill it as soon as possible. "Isn't it a beauty? I never had one, and it is just what I wanted," said Daisy, delightingly lifting the tray full of satin beds for pretty things, and pulling out the little drawer underneath, where the giver's card lay. "I told papa a work box or a fan would be better, but he liked this and would buy it," explained Laura, who knew how useless it was to her friend. "It was very kind of him, and I prefer it to either of those. I've nothing but my old chain and a shabby little pin to put in it now, but I'll fill it in time," answered Daisy, whose eyes seemed to behold the unbought treasures already reposing on the dainty cushion. "Real jewels are the best, my dear, for their worth and beauty are never lost. The tinsel girls wear now is poor stuff, and money is thrown away in buying it," said Mrs. Vaughn, who overheard them and guessed the temptation which beset the little country girl. Daisy looked conscious, but answered with a smile and a hand on her necklace, "This old thing wouldn't look well in my pretty box, so I'll leave it empty till I can afford something better. But that antique chain is worth many mock diamonds, for it is genuine, and its age adds to its value. Lovers of such things would pay a good price for that and keep it carefully, so don't be ashamed of it, my dear, though this pretty throat needs no ornament," added Mrs. Vaughn, hoping the girl would not forget the little lesson she was trying to give her. Daisy did not, but when she went to bed she set the jewel box on the table where it would meet her eyes the first thing in the morning, and then fell asleep, trying to decide that she would buy no baubles, since there were better things to spend her money on. Nothing more was said, but as the two girls went about the gay street on various pleasant errands, Daisy never could pass the jewelers' windows without stopping to gloat over the trays full of enchanting ornaments. More than once, when alone, she went in to inquire the prices of these much coveted trifles, and their cheapness made the temptation harder to resist. Certain things had a sort of fascination for her, and seemed to haunt her in an uncanny way, giving her no peace till she would decide to buy them. A golden rose with a diamond drop of dew on its leaves got into her very dreams, and a mailed butterfly flew before her as she walked, and a pair of silver bangles rattled in her ear like goblin castanets. "I shall not be safe till I spend that money, so I might as well decide on something and be at peace," said poor Daisy, after some days of this girlish struggle. "I needn't buy anything for Mother and Janey, for I can share my nice and useful presents with them. but I should like to be able to show the girls my lovely jewel box with something pretty in it, and I will. Laura needn't know anything about it, for I'm sure she'd think it silly, and so would her mother. I'll slip in now and buy that rose. It's only $3, and the other two will get one porte-bonheur or the dear butterfly. Making her way through the crowd that always stood before the brilliant window, Daisy went in and demanded the rose. Then, rather scared by this reckless act, she paused, and decided to look farther before buying anything else. With a pleasant little flutter of the heart as the pretty trinket was done up, she put her hand into her pocket to pay for it, and all the color died out of her cheeks when she found no purse there. In vain she pulled out handkerchief, keys, and pincushion. No sign of money was found but a 10-cent piece which had fallen out at some time. She looked so pale and dismayed that the shopman guessed her misfortune before she told it, but all the comfort he offered was the useless information that the crowded corner was a great place for pickpockets. There was nothing to be done but to return the rose and go sadly home, feeling that fate was very cruel to snatch away this long coveted happiness when so nearly won. Like the milkmaid who upset her pail while planning which ribbons would become her best, poor Daisy's dreams of splendor came to a sudden end, for instead of a golden rose she was left with only 10 cents, and not even a purse to put it in. She went home angry, disappointed, and ashamed, but too proud to complain, though not able to keep the loss to herself, for it was a sad affair, and her face betrayed her in spite of her efforts to be gay. "I know you were staring at the French diamonds in that corner store. I could never get you by there without a regular tug," cried Laura, when the tale was very briefly told. "I can't help it. I'm perfectly fascinated by those foolish things, and I know I should have bought some, so it is well that I've lost my money, perhaps," answered Daisy, looking so innocently penitent and so frankly disappointed that Mr. Vaughn said kindly, "So it is, for now I have a chance to complete my Christmas present. I was not sure it would suit, so I gave it empty. Please use this in buying some of the fascinating things you like so well." A bright $10 gold piece was slipped into Daisy's hand, and she was obliged to keep it, in spite of all her protestations that she could live without trinkets, and did not need it as her ticket home was already bought. Mrs. Vaughn added a nice little purse, and Laura advised her to keep the lone 10-cent piece for a good luck penny. "Now I can do it with a free mind, and fill my box as Mr. Vaughn wishes me to. Won't it be fun?" thought Daisy, as she skipped upstairs after dinner with a load of care lifted from her spirits. Laura was taking a music lesson, so her guest went to the sewing room to mend the facing of her dress, which someone had stepped on while she stood in that fatal crowd. A seamstress was there, sewing as if for a wager, and while Daisy stitched her braid, she wondered if there was any need of such haste, for the young woman's fingers flew, a feverish color was in her cheeks, and now and then she sighed as if tired or worried. "Let me help if you're in a hurry, Miss White. I can sew fast and know something of dressmaking. Please let me. I'd love to do anything for Mrs. Vaughn. She is so kind to me," said Daisy, when her small job was done, lingering to make the offer, though an interesting book was waiting in her room. "Thank you. I guess I can get through by dark. I do want to finish, for my mother is sick and needs me as well as the money," answered the needlewoman, pausing to give the girl a grateful smile, then stitching away faster than ever. "Then I must help. Give me that sleeve to sew up, and rest a little. You look dreadfully tired, and you've been working all day," insisted Daisy. "That's real kind, and it would be a great help if you really like it," answered Miss White, with a sigh of relief as she handed over the sleeve and saw how heartily and helpfully Daisy fell to work. Of course they talked, for the friendly act opened both hearts and did both girls good. As the younger listened to the little story of love and labor, the gold piece burned in her pocket, and tinsel trinkets looked very poor beside the sacrifices so sweetly made by this good daughter for the feeble mother whose comfort and support she was. "Our landlord has raised the rent, but I can't move now, for the cold and the worry would kill Ma, so I'm tugging away to pay the extra money, else he will turn us out, I'm afraid." Why don't you tell Mrs. Vaughn? She helps everyone and loves to do it." "So she does, bless her. She has done a deal for us, and that's why I can't ask for more. I won't beg while I can work. But worry wears on me, and if I break down, what will become of mother?" Poor Mary shook the tears out of her eyes, for daylight was going, and she had no time to cry. But Daisy stopped to wonder how it would seem to be in her place, tugging away day after day to keep a roof over mother. It made her heart ache to think of it, and sent her hand to her pocket with a joyful sense of power, for alms-giving was a new pleasure, and Daisy felt very rich. "I've had a present today, and I'd love dearly to share it with you, if you wouldn't mind. I shall only waste it, so do let me send it to your mother in any shape you like," she said in a timid but very earnest way. "Oh, Miss Field, I couldn't do it. You are too kind. I never thought of hinting," began Mary, quite overcome by this unexpected proposal. Daisy settled the matter by running away to the study, where Mr. Vaughn was napping, to ask him if he would give her 2 5s for the gold piece. "Ah, the fascination is at work, I see, and we can't wait till Monday to buy the pretty things. Girls will be girls, and must sow their innocent wild oats, I suppose. Here, my dear, beware of pickpockets, and good luck to the shopping," said the old gentleman, as he put 2 crisp bills into her hands, with a laugh. "Pickpockets won't get this, and I know my shopping will prosper now," answered Daisy, in such a happy tone that Mr. Vaughn wondered what plan was in the girl's head to make her look so sweet and glad. She went slowly upstairs, looking at the 2 bills, which did not seem half so precious as when in the shape of gold. "I wonder if it would be very extravagant to give her all of it. I shall do some silly thing if I keep it. Her boots were very thin, and she coughs, and if she is sick it will be dreadful. Suppose I give her 5 for herself and 5 for her mother. I'd love to feel rich and generous for once in my life, and give real help." The house was very still, and Daisy paused at the head of the stairs to settle the point, little dreaming that Mrs. Vaughn had heard the talk in the sewing room, and saw her as she stood thoughtfully staring at the 2 bits of paper in her hand. "I shouldn't feel ashamed if Mrs. Vaughn found me out in this, but I should never dare to let her see my bangles and pins if I got them. I know she thinks them silly, especially so for me. She said she hoped I'd set a good example to Laura in the way of simplicity and industry. I like that, and so will mother. But then my jewel box, all empty, and such a pretty thing. Oh dear, I wish I could be wise and silly at the same time." Daisy sighed, and took a few more steps, then smiled, pulled out her purse, and taking the 10-cent piece, tossed it up, saying, "Heads Mary, tails myself." Up flew the bright little coin, and down it came, with the Goddess of Liberty uppermost. "That settles it. She shall have the 10, and I'll be content with the old chain for all my jewelry," said Daisy aloud, and looking much relieved she skipped away, leaving the unsuspected observer to smile at her girlish mode of deciding the decision, and to rejoice over the generous nature unspoiled as yet. She watched her young guest with new interest during the next few days, for certain fine plans were in her mind, and every trifle helped the decision for or against. Mary White went smiling home that night to rejoice with her feeble mother over the help that came so opportunely and so kindly. Daisy looked as if her shopping had prospered wonderfully, though the old necklace was the only ornament she wore, and those who saw her happy face at the merry making thought that she needed no other. She danced as if her feet were as light as her heart, and enjoyed that party more than the first, for no envy spoiled her pleasure, and a secret content brightened all the world to her. But the next day she discovered that temptation still had power over her, and she nearly spoiled her first self-conquest by the fall which is very apt to come after a triumph, to show us how hard it is to stand fast even when small Apollons get in our way. She broke the clasp of the necklace, and Mrs. Vaughn directed her to a person who mended such things. The man examined it with interest, and asked its history. Daisy very willingly told all she knew, inquiring if it was really valuable. "I'd give $25 for it any time. I've been trying to get one to go with a pair of earrings I picked up, and this is just what I want. Of course you don't care to sell it, miss?" he asked, glancing at Daisy's simple dress and rather excited face, for his offer almost took her breath away. She was not sufficiently worldly wise to see that the jeweler wanted it enough to give more for it, and to make a good bargain for herself. $25 seemed a vast sum, and she only paused to collect her wits before she answered eagerly, "Yes, I should like to sell it. I've had it so long I'm tired of it, and it's all out of fashion. Mrs. Vaughn told me some people would be glad to get it because it is genuine. Do you really think it is worth $25? It's old, and I shall have to tinker it up, but it matches the earrings so well I am willing to pay a good price for it." "Will you take the money now, miss, or think it over and call again?" asked the man, more respectfully, after hearing Mrs. Vaughn's name. "I'll take it now, if you please, sir. I shall leave town in a day or two, and may not have time to call again," said Daisy, taking a half regretful look at the chain, as the man counted out the money. Holding it fast, she went away, feeling that this unexpected fortune was a reward for the good use she had made of her gold piece. "Now I can buy some really valuable ornament, and wear it without being ashamed. What shall it be? No tinsel for me this time." And she walked by the attractive shop window with an air of lofty indifference, for she really was getting over her first craze for that sort of thing. Feeling as if possessed the power to buy real diamonds, Daisy turned toward the great jewelers, pausing now and then to look for some pretty gift for Janey, bought with her own money. "What can I get for mother? She never will own that she needs anything, and goes shabby so I can be nice. I could get some of those fine thick stockings. Hers are all darns, but they might not fit. Flannel is useful, but it isn't a pretty present. What does she need most?" As Daisy stopped before a great window, full of all manner of comfortable garments, her eye fell on a fur-lined cloak marked $25. It seemed to answer her question like a voice, and as she looked at it, she heard again the words, "But, mother, that money was for your cloak, and you need it very much." "Hush, dear, don't say a word to spoil Daisy's pleasure. I can do very well with a shawl over the old sack." "How can I forget that? What a selfish girl I am to be thinking of jewelry when that dear, good mother hasn't a cloak on her back. Daisy Field, I'm ashamed of you. Go in and buy that nice warm one at once, and don't let me hear of that ridiculous box again." After this little burst of remorse and self-reproach, Daisy took another look, and Prudence suggested asking the advice of some more experienced shopper than herself before making so important a purchase. As if the fates were interested in settling the matter at once, while she stood undecided, Mary White came down the street with a parcel of work in her hands. "Just the person! The Vaughns needn't know anything about it, and Mary is a good judge." It was pleasant to see the two faces brighten as the girls met. Rather comical to watch the deep interest with which one listened and the other explained, and beautiful to hear the grateful eagerness in Mary's voice as she answered cordially, "Indeed I will. You've been so kind to my mother. There's nothing I wouldn't be glad to do for yours." So in they went, and after due consideration the cloak was bought and ordered home, both girls feeling that it was a little ceremony full of love and good will. For Mary's time was money, yet she gave it gladly, and Daisy's purse was left empty of all but the good luck penny, which was to bring still greater happiness in unsuspected ways. Another secret was put away in the empty jewel box, and the cloak hidden in Daisy's trunk, for she felt shy of telling her little business transactions, lest the Vaughns should consider her extravagant. But the thought of mother's surprise and pleasure warmed her heart, and made the last days of her visit the happiest. Being a mortal girl, she did give a sigh as she tied a bit of black velvet round her white throat instead of the necklace, which seemed really a treasure. Now it was gone, and she looked with great disfavour at the shabby little pin worn where she had fondly hoped to see the golden rose. She put a real one in its place, and never knew that her own fresh, happy face was a lovely, for the thought of the two mothers made comfortable by her was better than all the pearls and diamonds that fell from the lips of the good girl in the fairy tale. "Let me help you pack your trunk. I love to cram things in and dance on the lid when it won't shut," said Laura, joining her friend next day, just as she had got the cloak box well hidden under a layer of clothes. "Thank you. I'm almost done, and rather like to fuss over my own things in my own way. You won't mind if I give this pretty box of handkerchiefs to Mother, will you, dear? I have so many things. I must go halves with someone. The muslin apron of box of bonbons are for Janey, because she can't wear the gloves. And this lovely jabot is too old for her," said Daisy, surveying her new possessions with girlish satisfaction. "Do what you like with your own. Mamma has a box of presents for your people. She is packing it now, but I don't believe you can get it in. Your trunk is so much fuller than when you came. This must go in a safe place, or your heart will break." And Laura took up the jewel box, adding with a laugh as she opened it, "You haven't filled it, after all. What did you do with Papa's gold piece?" "That's a secret. I'll tell some day, but not yet," said Daisy, diving into her trunk to hide the color in her cheeks. "Sly thing! I know you've got silver spiders and filigree rackets and rhinestone moons and stars stowed away somewhere and won't confess it. I wanted to fill this box, but Mamma said you'd do it better yourself. So I let it alone, but I was afraid you'd think I was a selfish pig to have a pin for every day in the month and never give you one," said Laura, as she looked at the single tarnished brooch reposing on the satin cushion. "Where's your chain?" she added, before Daisy could speak. "It is safe enough. I'm tired of it, and don't care if I never see it again." And Daisy packed away, and laughed as she smoothed the white dress in its tray, remembering that it was paid for by the sale of the old necklace. "Give it to me, then. I like it immensely. It's so odd. I'll exchange for anything of mine you choose. Will you?" asked Laura, who seemed bent on asking inconvenient questions. "I shall have to tell, or she will think me very ungrateful." And Daisy felt a pang of regret even then, for Laura's offer was a generous one. "Like G.W., I cannot tell a lie. So I must fess that I sold the old thing, and spent the money for something I wanted very much. Not jewelry, but something to give away." Daisy was spared further confessions by the entrance of Mrs. Vaughn with a box in her hand. "I have room for something more. Give me that, Laura. It will just fit in." And taking the little casket, she added, "Mary White wants to try on your dress, dear. Go at once. I will help Daisy." Laura went, and her mother stood looking down at the kneeling girl with an expression of affectionate satisfaction which would have puzzled Daisy had she seen it. "Has the visit been a pleasant one, my dear?" "Oh, very. I can't thank you enough for the good it has done me. I hope I can pay a little of the debt next summer if you come our way again," cried Daisy, looking up with a face full of gratitude. "We shall probably go to Europe for the summer. Laura is a good age for it now, and we shall enjoy it." "How splendid! We shall miss you dreadfully. But I'm glad you are going, and I hope Laura will find time to write me now and then. I shall want to know how she likes the foreign parts we've talked about so much." "You shall know. We won't forget you, my dear." And with a caressing touch on the smiling yet wistful face upturned to hers, Mrs. Vaughn went away to pack the empty jewel box, leaving Daisy to drop a few irrepressible tears on the new gown, over the downfall of her summer hopes, and the longings of girls feel for that enchanted world that lies beyond the sea. "We shall see you before we go, so we won't gush now," said Laura, as she bade her friend good-bye, adding in a whisper, "Some folks can have secrets as well as other folks, and be as sly, so don't think you have all the fun to yourself. You dear, good, generous darling." Daisy looked bewildered, and Mrs. Vaughn added to her surprise by kissing her very warmly as she said, "I wanted to find a good friend for my spoiled girl, and I think I have succeeded." There was no time for explanation, and all the way home Daisy kept wondering what they meant. But she forgot everything when she saw the dear faces beaming at the door, and ran straight into her mother's arms, while Janey hugged the trunk till her turn came for something better. When the first raptures were over, out came the cloak, and Daisy was well repaid for her little trials and sacrifices when she was folded in it as her mother held her close, and thanked her as mothers only can. Sitting in its soft shelter, she told all about it, and coming to the end said, as she took up the jewel box, unpacked with the other generous gifts. "I haven't a thing to put in it, but I shall value it because it taught me a lesson which I hope I never shall forget. See what a pretty thing it is." And opening it, Daisy gave a cry of surprise and joy, for there lay the golden rose with Laura's name and "Sub Rosa" on a slip of paper. The dear thing! She knew I wanted it, and that is what she meant by secrets. I'll write and tell her mine to-morrow. "Here's something more," said Janey, who had been lifting the tray while her sister examined the long-desired flower. A pair of real gold bangles shone before her delighted eyes, and a card in Mr. Vaughan's handwriting bore these words: "Handcuffs for the thief who stole the pocketbook." Daisy hardly had time to laugh gaily at the old gentleman's joke, when Janey cried out, as she opened the little drawer, "Here's another!" It was a note from Mrs. Vaughn, but all thought it the greatest treasure of the three, for it said briefly: "Dear Daisy, Mary told me some of your secrets, and I found out the others. Forgive me and go to Europe with Laura in May. Your visit was a little test. You stood it well, and we want to know more of you. The little box is not quite empty, but the best jewels are the self-denial, sweet charity, and good sense you put in yourself. Your friend, A.V." Daisy could not speak, and her mother looked into the box with eyes full of tender tears, while Janey danced about them, clashing the bangles like a happy little bayadere, till her sister found her voice again. Pointing to a great bright tear that shone on the blue velvet, she said, with her cheek against her mother's, "I always wanted a real diamond, and there's a more precious one than any I could buy. Now I'm sure my jewel box is full." End of chapter 9. Daisy's Jewel Box and How She Filled It. Recording by Candace Stellick, Dallas, Texas.